Part 1 of how I stole my boyfriend's side chick. My boyfriend Zach and I decided to check out a new restaurant in town for date night. We got in his car and started to head out. He usually has better cell coverage than me, so we were using the navigation on his phone to get to the new spot. I noticed his buddy from work, Matt, was texting him as usual. However, this time I noticed the heart emojis out of the corner of my eye at the top of the screen from Matt, which I thought was weird. I started to think about it, and Matt would always text pretty late at night, and my boyfriend always seemed really happy when texting him. I played it off like I was going to look for a faster route, picked up his phone, and quickly copied down the number. When we got to the restaurant, I started paying attention and noticed Zach texting throughout our date. The next day, I called the number and a girl named Jessica answered. He saved her number under Matt and told me he was a buddy from work for months. We started talking and she told me that she had no idea that he had a girlfriend. She also told me that they met on Tinder and they've been talking for a while. She was really honest and cool about it, and she was just as mad as I was. We decided to meet up and talk some more about what we were going to do to get back at him. This is when things got interesting. Part 2 of how I stole my boyfriend's side chick. Jessica and I decided to meet up downtown and come up with a plan on how we were going to confront Zach about playing us both. We were planning on doing it together to make him as uncomfortable as possible. I was surprised when I first saw her because she was drop dead gorgeous, which made me a little nervous at first. We met up at a brunch spot and began talking over mimosas. She was furious with Zach for wasting her time and lying to her, as was I. Everything she was saying was exactly how I felt. A few more mimosas in and she said, "We don't need him, we're way too cute for him anyways, especially you." That's when she grabbed my hand to comfort me. When she grabbed my hand, I got nervous and jokingly made a comment about how I'm done with men. Surprisingly, she agreed and said we should start dating women instead with a smile. We went shopping after brunch and ended up back at her place a few hours later drinking wine. A few glasses in, we began trying on and modeling some of the new clothes we bought. One thing led to another and we hooked up. We really hit it off and we stayed up all night talking and laughing. I went to her place again the next night and the night after that. We both ended up completely ghosting Zach and dating each other instead. It's been over a year now and we couldn't be any happier. So, thanks, Zach.
Crazy story time about how my sister and I found out that we were hooking up with the same guy. So I was a freshman, my sister was a sophomore, and there was this really cute guy in her grade that I liked. But I could never find a way to talk to him because we weren't in the same grade and had none of the same classes. And my sister and I were not close at all. Like, we didn't tell each other shit, we didn't really talk to each other or anything. So by that being said, we never told each other about the boys that we liked. We just didn't have that bond. Well, track season came around. So they called all the people down who wanted to do track, and I saw him walk past my classroom window, so I decided to go too. So I signed up for track, and him and I started to talk a little bit. We exchanged numbers, and he was popular, I wasn't, so he didn't want to be seen with me. So after attendance, we would go to this graveyard right by the track and hook up. Well, the next day we had a meet at our school. So him and I went to the graveyard, hooked up, and that's when it started getting crazy, like for part 2.
Part 2. So on our way back from doing our thing, we had saw a group of kids that were behind this bush and they were chiefing. And we didn't think that they saw us because we were like, oh, they're just smoking, like whatever. So I go back to the meet, everything is good until the end of the meet. One of my best friends sends me this picture that I guess somebody posted on their story. And it was a picture of me and the kid hooking up. And next thing I know, my sister is blowing up my phone. And like I said, my sister and I didn't have a good bond, so I didn't give a shit what she had to say because I didn't know. So then I got home. And as soon as I walked into my room, my sister was literally waiting there for me. And she's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, him and I are in a relationship." And I'm like, "Bitch, what the fuck?" And she was like, "Well, it's on the down low, but we're in a relationship. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're a whore." So then she decides to drive both of us over to his house. So we all decided to just stay away from each other. But then they got back together. So I just figured that wasn't fair, and I'm still hooking up with him while they're together.
This is why you should never leave the table when you're on a blind date. One of my best friends and I worked at the same restaurant. When I came in later that day for my shift, she told me a crazy story. She said that her first table were this guy and this girl, and she could tell they were on a first date. The girl was nervous, so she ordered a glass of wine. As far as she knew, the date seemed to be going well, and the girl got up to go to the bathroom. Right when my friend was about to come over and bring the silverware, she saw him put something in her wine. My friend, obviously terrified and freaking out, let our manager know, who then let the police know, and ran into the bathroom to tell her what was going on. The girl ended up staying in the bathroom until the police came, arrested him, and escorted him out of the building. It was noon on a Tuesday. You don't think you're going to be drugged at noon on a Tuesday.
This is why you should be careful who you swipe right on. I met this guy on Tinder and I wanted to meet in public, but he didn't want to. So one night I was bored and I went over to his house instead. I made sure to tell my friends where I was going and sent them my location. When I went to his house, we did the deed and I fell asleep. I woke up to see him going through my phone. When he noticed I was up, he asked why I had so many guys on my phone. I ignored his question and asked for my phone back. At this point, I was ready to leave, but my purse was gone. I tried to text my friend, but he had deleted all of my contacts, even my dad's number. I started to panic, but I quickly calmed myself down and tried to talk to him. He was twice my size, so I knew he could do some damage if he wanted to. I planned on sneaking out when he fell asleep, but he wasn't falling asleep. We stayed up silently laying in bed waiting for each other to fall asleep until 3 a.m. The next morning, I told him I had to go to work so I would need my things back. That's when he insisted on driving me to work and picking me up. On the way, I was planning on telling one of my coworkers what happened, but he came inside of the store and stayed there my entire shift, just watching me. When I was off work, he took me back to his place. I thought I'd eventually be able to get away from him, but 2 weeks passed and he still wouldn't let me out of his sight. This is why you shouldn't do drugs. I'm a nurse in a busy hospital and I work in urgent care. One night a guy got brought in and he was really messed up on all kinds of drugs. He was really sick, but after a few hours he was conscious and started acting crazy and getting violent. We were forced to secure him to the bed with soft restraints and give him something to calm him down. He accused us of being aliens and kept demanding that we take him back to Earth. I informed him that he is indeed still on Earth and we're just trying to help him, but he kept insisting that he needed to escape. As I was coming back into the room to give him something to calm down, he managed to remove all soft restraints and began ripping out all of his IVs. Then he got up from the bed, completely naked and covered in blood, and began to run out of the hospital room. He ran out into the hallway as we chased after him and yelled at him to stop. We were on the second floor and he ran to the elevator and pushed the call button vigorously. As we got closer to him, he freaked out and proceeded to the railing looking down at the lobby of the first floor. He got on top of the railing and said, "You'll never catch me alive, I won't be your test subject," and jumped. I'll never forget the sound his body made when it hit the ground or the screams of the nurses. To my surprise, he got up and started limping towards the exit, flipping us off from the hospital lobby, hysterically laughing. After that, I never saw him again. This is why skipping detention might be a good idea. When I was in high school, I slacked off a lot. My junior year, my math teacher was pretty upset by this. Once during a parent-teacher meeting, he told my mom that I wasn't doing as well as I could and called me lazy. My mom agreed and stated that she wouldn't blame him if he pushed and punished me to work harder. From this day on, he did exactly that, always questioning me before anyone else and always sat next to me during exercises. This is when my classmates started realizing that he was a little obsessed with me and started teasing me about it. Right before Christmas break, he threw us a surprise party with chocolates and mock champagne. He poured me an extra glass and congratulated me for doing better. I drank the first glass he gave me, but not the second because I'm diabetic and had already had too much chocolate. During the next class, I felt extremely sick and almost fainted. I spent the rest of the day in the nurse's office and chalked it up to eating too much candy. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. He became extremely angry and yelled at me in front of everyone. The look in his eyes chilled me and I cried. He gave me detention but scheduled it hours later than the usual time and said he would personally be there as well. When I showed up, it was getting dark already and I noticed I was the only student there. Something felt off and a feeling deep inside my gut was pushing me to skip. Right when I decided to skip, I look over and see him walk. Part 2 of why skipping detention might be a good idea. As he walked towards me, I was getting nervous. I told him that I had an emergency and I had to go, but I would email the school and reschedule later. Right after this, I ran off. As I was running away, he yelled at me and told me that I had to obey him and come to detention or he'd call my parents. At this moment, I didn't care. The feeling in my gut kept growing, so I sprinted to the bus and went home. I was afraid that he'd call my parents, but my parents greeted me normally when I got home, so I assumed he didn't. The next day, I was expecting to get an earful, but he wasn't there, and as weeks passed, he never came back. Then a shrink came to our class and asked if he'd like to talk about our math teacher, but no one knew why. Fast forward a few years later when I became a teacher and started chatting with my coworker. I mentioned his name, speaking to her about my weird, bizarre teacher and how I skipped detention. That's when one of the oldest workers there went pale hearing his name. It turns out a few days after I skipped detention, my math teacher was arrested for downloading child you-know-what from the dark web. He also had tons of snuff videos doing terrible things to children and teens. Now I always wonder what would have happened if I hadn't followed my gut instincts and stayed for detention that day with just me and him in that classroom.
Story time of the time I broke my sister's tooth. So at the time, me, my brother, and my sister were all home alone. I was 13, my sister was like 7 years old, and my brother was like 12 years old. And at this time, my asthma was really bad and I had breathing problems. So me, my brother, and my sister used to always play around and like fight with each other, wrestling, blah, blah, blah. So my brother told my little sister to sit on my face with the blanket over my head, and I could not breathe at all. I was literally like dying, and she was sitting on me for a whole like 2 minutes straight. So I was like screaming for help. I was like, let me out. I can't breathe. Like, it was really bad. And then I finally like pushed her off. Like, I got up like the great big Hulk. And I got kind of mad. So then I just got up and I swung at her face. But she didn't cry or anything. And then we looked at her face and then it was like red. She opened up her mouth and her tooth was gone and she was bleeding. Story time.